Good morning. I know it's been a few weeks since I've done any content of any sort, and we haven't done really any updates on the automobiles that we've been working on. So we've got a lot of car projects going on. I've got this one right behind me, which is a Mitsubishi Eclipse 2G DSM. That is a customer's car. We're going to briefly go over this and what we've been doing to it. And then I'll have another video here shortly also about our 97 Subaru Impreza GC rally car. So first of all, I have fallen behind by a few weeks for kind of creating content. I wouldn't believe I'm necessarily all that great at it, and I don't really have a lot of time to dedicate to it as much as I would love to. It's just difficult with everything we've got going on. We're kind of going through a growth spurt business-wise in many aspects. We've had some responsibilities to try to take care of with the business through those growing pains over the last couple of weeks. And we are getting prepared to make a big move into a new shop. And from there, we are looking to hire and to expand in order to provide what we need for that growth. Part of that is personnel. We're looking at hiring a couple people. I probably got a new technician coming on. I'll probably be looking for another one, if not maybe a couple in the near future, maybe early next year. I'm looking for a videographer who can work at least a few days a week to help gather content and put content together for us for YouTube and other short-term social media. We're in some other positions in the company, and we're starting to put ads out trying to find those people. Absolutely, if you know anybody who might be helpful and such, please send an email versus messaging or commenting directly to me so I can process that through the business appropriately at Tyme Autocraft at Gmail. Now to the important stuff. This video, I'm going to talk about even a mild build on a 97 Mitsubishi Eclipse. This is a customer's car that he had gotten and it wasn't really sorted out well when he got it, had issues. He was hoping to just be able to get it up and running and drivable. When I first met him, he actually came to buy a transmission. I had a car that I had recently torn down because I'm going in a different direction with it. That's a new acquisition of mine, which is also a 97 Eclipse that I am doing a drivetrain swap on, along with other things. I'm going to change the turbo setup on it and everything else, a lot of things. So that's a full-blown race build. We'll do a series on that. It's going to take a couple of years to probably build it correctly and get it all sorted out. But either way, I had the transmission out of that car, which was a nicely built transmission with a limited slip differential. It's a front-wheel drive, not an all-wheel drive, so it has a limited slip in it. And he was interested in that transmission because although this car, for the most part, is stock, it has some basic bolt-ons. It has obviously had stuff done to it before that I think before he had it or acquired it, a lot of the performance stuff like the larger turbo or anything that may have been on it had been pulled off and probably sold separately or whatever. So he gets this thing, grinding some gears, some issues with the transmission, puts the transmission in it, and from there he's had a handful of issues that maybe he was struggling a little bit to try to sort out, and then reached out to me again about, hey, can you guys help me get this car back on the road? So we've kind of put an idea, a timeline, a budget together. And that's where I kind of want to start right there is if you get into cars and you're going to get into any type of automotive project, the budget and your time frame are always going to be less than you think they are. Typically, you're going to spend twice as much and it's going to take twice as long than you can possibly anticipate. That's a good general rule to just go by. You can scratch it down on paper, kind of figure out how long it's going to take you to build, estimate what it's going to cost. You're going to come across things that you cannot foresee. You will find other problems, and that always takes time and money. Now, on that note, there is not a problem that time and money can't fix. You just got to have more of it. So there is nothing that's impossible. Impossible just takes longer and costs more money. The things we found on this, a lot of it, we obviously, I did a very thorough inspection of it and diagnostic on it. We made the list of things to do, and then we got started. And of course, as we test things and tear into things, we find things that are that are problems. This particular car had multiple people working on it, probably over many years, and we found anything from bad gaskets, bad seals, bolts missing, things not installed correctly or secured properly, and along with obviously the known issues like some leaks and some bad parts and whatnot. So I'll go over it real quick and what we have done and where we're at now. We're just a couple of pieces away from being able to wrap this thing up. And so when we first got it, it did not run, at least not for me. The customer said that he did have it running, but was having issues bleeding the clutch. But it was also running very poor and having issues. So right off the bat, the battery wasn't real healthy. It wasn't necessarily completely unsalvageable, but we did do a recondition charge on it, which usually takes a couple days on a proper charger to bring it back to life. And once we were able to do that, it actually tested, I think, at like 96 or 97%. So the battery we were able to bring it back because it wasn't really all that old. It had just been sitting and been drained and recharged multiple times, but never efficiently to give it a sufficient charge. So we got the battery back in condition, but we immediately started getting into the known issues. We had an engine mount. The customer had already put the front and rear torque mounts and the transmission mount on. The engine mount he had not replaced because there are two studs and a bolt that hold it to the bracket, and one of the studs was actually broke off. So the concern there was either getting that stud extracted and replaced, or did we have to replace the bracket, which required at that point pull in the timing belt. Lucky in that aspect, we were able to extract the broken stud. We put a bolt there in place. We had another bracket for in case we needed it, but we now have this secured and got the new mount on it. On the front of the engine, we had no power steering pump, and obviously we need to have that and then have that installed. So we ended up actually replacing all of the return line and supply lines right here at the pump, and hooked up the pressure line to a pump that I had here that was a good used pump. Got a new pulley on the water pump because the one that was on there was incorrect and damaged. It was actually bent. So we got that on there, and we didn't have the AC, so the AC is completely disconnected, although the compressor's there. Customer doesn't want to worry about that right now. So we've ignored that and left that alone. And that essentially had put together the front of the engine. I take that back. We did replace the harmonic balancer. So I do have a new dampener on there. So at that point, we've got essentially the front of the engine together. Off of the front of the engine is the oil supply line. We ended up replacing that line to the turbo and had to get a banjo fitting to the dash 4 that fits the T25 stock turbo, which is what this has. It's got a stock turbo, even though you might be able to see it in the video. We've got a nice tubular manifold. I don't know whose brand it is. It seems pretty decent quality. It's not the best, but it isn't bad either. But it's got a stock T25 with a full exhaust from there. So there's a lot of reasons why I suspect this does not have the original turbo. The hard line, oil supply line that was on this turbo was damaged. The car had obviously had something come up and hit it. It had pinched it right where it comes out of the oil filter housing, the oil pressure regulator housing, and was damaged. So we ended up just deciding to replace it. I've got a line that came off of another car. I didn't have the correct fitting for the turbo. Ordered that. We talked about putting like a 16G on the car. The customer doesn't want to do that at this moment, as much as just get the car up and running and driving, sort through any issues it has before throwing anything else at it. And I am not opposed to that theory at all. I did struggle to find everything that was stock to be able to hook this turbo up and have everything working correctly. But we were able, through digging through some of the parts we have just laying around here, since I've been messing with DSMs and Mitsubishis for so long, we essentially were able to find almost everything we had, except for that adapter. We did redo the oil return line. Again, the one that was on it was damaged. It actually had cracks in it and it was leaking. So we replaced that, and we resealed the oil pan, which was also leaking. So at that point, we assumed that essentially the engine is in the short block or the long block of the engine is together. The turbo is mounted and installed. We did kind of redo some of the coolant lines. It's got these silicone hoses pretty much everywhere, and that for the most part are in good condition, but some of them were not routed correctly, or the hard lines that go on the exterior of the block were not mounted securely or were missing hardware at all, and we had to secure those to the engine properly and get the hoses trimmed back and caulked appropriately so they weren't kinked, preventing proper coolant flow or whatever. He did tell us, which we have not tested and are not going to bother with, that the heater core leaks, and that he had already bypassed it with just some 5/8 hose looped around, which of course when you try to loop it like that, it just wants to kink. So I did pick up a GM bypass hose off of a pickup truck. It's pretty common hose. They're fairly cheap. I think I picked it up for $8 or $9, but it's already a formed hose that actually makes a 180. And you can go from one heater core hose to the other heater core supply hose to the heater core return hose or line coming off of the engine. And it's almost perfectly shaped, and clamp that on, done. So we did redo the hoses going to the throttle body, the coolant hoses there, and everything else we were able to kind of sort out and get right. We did reseal the thermostat housing because it was leaking when we pressure tested the coolant system, along with put a new thermostat and a new radiator cap on it. So at that point, now we were able to pressure test the coolant system. We found no leaks. We did have to also replace the drain plug in the radiator, and we put new mounts underneath the radiator. One of them was actually missing, so we got new mounts for the radiator, and so all the bushings here on the top are new. They were already new. It looked like someone had replaced them. We were missing hardware up here, so we secured that. And at that point, the coolant system is pretty much in order. We have not run the car yet. I have just water in it at the moment, just to be able to pressure test it. And then we're going to, once I've got the engine running, we are going to perform a proper clean out and flush. Because there is some gunk in the coolant system, and we want to get all that cleaned out. As of the coolant system, the customer did have a set of brand new fans that he had bought. Unfortunately, one of them is incorrect. One of them is correct. So we were able to install that, and it did just plug and play into the factory harness. I think the issue is he bought 2 of the same fans. This radiator setup, the factory radiator setup, obviously runs 2 fans. One is different and larger than the other. One is plastic housing. This is aftermarket one. Fit fine. It bolted into the factory mount positions, which this aluminum radiator has, and went in just fine. The one in front of the turbo has to be a lower profile and is a metal casing because of the heat that the turbo and the manifold and the exhaust would put off right there. So unfortunately, we've left that one off for now. Being that we don't have an AC system on this car, and I do have some factory radiator fans that we can put on here. For now, I have not put another radiator fan on here, but I can put a good used one on here. We've just kind of left this room open right now, trying to make sure that we don't have, because again, we haven't ran the car yet. I want to make sure all these lines are correct. We don't have any leaks. Everything's working well. And then I'll probably throw in just a good used factory radiator or radiator fan. So now we've got essentially the engine together and the cooling system all sealed up. From there, we went and started looking over getting the harness laid out. The harness was not ran properly. It wasn't secured anywhere correctly, or not secured at all, just kind of bunched up and laid everywhere. So we sorted it out, even resecured, not just resecured, but even rewrapped it in some sections and cleaned it up, and then laid it back out and secured it properly, made sure everything, all the connectors are good, plugged everything in, that kind of thing. So once we got that all sorted out, which as you can see right now, I've got the spark plug wires off and the injectors unplugged, and that's because we have been chasing some intake leaks, and that's what I'm about to talk about next. So once we got the harness laid out and sorted out, we moved to the intake track. You can see my contraption here. This is my boost test setup. Essentially, I hook up a air line and a regulator, and I've got a boost gauge run up there so we can see it, even since this car just only has the factory boost gauge, which I'm not going to say is correct or reliable to know if it's working properly. But I'll use that to also see what kind of pressure we're getting when we do a boost leak test. Very quickly, we found multiple. Right off the bat, we found a bunch of hose clamps and stuff like that, not done properly. The intake track was not secured correctly, especially the upper intercooler pipe and hose. And the clamps are loose and stuff like that. So once we got all that sorted out and mounted correctly, that fixed a lot of it. So we didn't have a leak between the turbo and the intercooler, which has got the stock side mount intercooler, and between the intercooler and the throttle body. We did find one at the blow-off valve. It does have this aftermarket blow-off valve. I don't even know whose it is. If it's just some cheap, cheesy eBay one or something. But it goes into the factory. It's got an adapter that goes into the factory opening, and it was leaking around there because there's supposed to be a rubber sleeve between the piece that drops down in there and the plastic tube that goes from the intercooler to this upper intercooler hose. So there was no rubber sleeve in there. So we took that out, and since I didn't have one, what we did instead was took some rubber mat and basically cut our own out and put that around there, and slid that back in there, put a fresh clamp on it, pressure tested again, no leak. Speaking of the intake, we did replace the intake, the actual intake pipe. And that's because there is the one that the car came with, and then this one, which is one that I had used on hand. from another car that we parted out. So this is the one that the car had, which at first glance looks like a decent piece. They had painter's tape blocking off the blow-off valve return hose or return section on this tube. But the problem with this tube is we went to go install it, and the whole intake sits way up here. Your mass airflow sensor, the air filter, everything would not fit into the location it's supposed to down in here. And immediately I realized this thing is not shaped properly. It's actually too tall. So if you look at the difference there, they are not shaped the same. This one is further down, and even if you take this one and try to set it that way, it clocks it incorrectly at the turbo and creates an issue there, and then puts the mass airflow and the filter down like this, where it will not actually fit into the car. So this is just, as much as you can consider it, junk. So we got rid of it. Luckily I had one that came off of another car. We cleaned it up, sandblasted it, painted it black, just so it looks a little bit more fitting for the car. Got it in there, fits fine, plugs in fine, all that. So put an actual block off on the blow-off valve return. Being the car has no tune, no DSM link or anything of the sort, I would really like to have a factory blow-off valve. I don't have a 2G stock factory blow-off valve. We're just going to run this one. He has plans to do a whole nother turbo setup in the near future. We're trying to get the car just kind of running and operating at the moment. So we went with this, reused his coupler, did a proper block off, and plugged or capped these for now just so we could test things. We'll use obviously one of these ports for the boost controller bleed off, and then one of these ports off of the valve cover breather. So anyway, we got this all set up, and we've got a nice intake setup now. From there, we pressure tested the system again, and what we found was that the intake manifold sealed to the head, where they had the gasket there, they had gunked it up a lot with RTV, orange RTV sealant, and that was leaking. We also found leaks at the throttle body to the manifold gasket, shaft seals on the throttle body, which there really isn't much we could do about that unless we resealed or rebuilt the throttle body, or sent it off to be rebuilt, or replaced it. That was the one thing that we didn't mess with because it's slight in comparison to everything else that we found. We found a couple of hoses up here, vacuum lines, the breather hose coming off the PCV to the intake manifold, the hose coming from the intake manifold to the brake booster was cracked and split, and as soon as we went to go touch it or take it off, it just broke and crumbled in our hands. So the fuel pressure regulator itself, the diaphragm on it, was bad and was leaking all around. The vacuum hose coming off of it. So essentially, we've replaced every vacuum line, every breather line, both the throttle body gaskets, the intake manifold gasket, and the EGR block-off plate gasket. Those were all leaking. We weren't seeing more than about 6 psi of pressure when we tried to pressurize the system. It was just bleeding off everywhere. So we took the intake manifold off, resealed all of those things, replaced all those hoses, put the intake manifold back in, and when we did catch that, and I don't have the injectors here, if you'll look at this injector, this is a set of 390s I think they are, that I have, that came off of a 1G Auto DSM. But either way, you see that plastic piston or cap off of the nozzle. 2 of his injectors were missing those. So the seal that goes around, we got the seals, these seals that go around here and seal it into the cylinder head right here, without that plastic sleeve around the nozzle, would not seal to the seal itself. I mean, there's just an air gap. So you actually had 2 of those injectors just blowing out air. So what we did is, I've got, again, I need 450s for this car because that's the stock size injector. The car has a stock turbo, stock intercooler, an intake, and an exhaust, but essentially the airflow system is mostly stock, and it's got a stock tune on it. This manifold getting replaced, the intake pipe and the exhaust pipe, and the EGR being deleted are really the only thing with the intake and exhaust system that have been modified. So I need stock boost pressure, and I need stock fuel delivery. So I need 450 cc's. I don't have any. I looked through all of my DSM stuff, and I had some NA injectors. I've got some auto injectors, which are a little bit smaller at 390. I've got 550s, 650s, 850s, 720s, 1100s, 1200s. I had all kinds of options, nothing stock. Luckily, one of our customers does have a set of his old ones. I will be getting those tomorrow. He's going to stop by and drop those off. So thank you, John, for hooking us up with a set of injectors. What we've done for now is I threw a set of 550s in here just so we could boost test the system and pressure test everything. So we got the 550s in there with some good seals, and we're able to pressure test the system. Again, this go round, after resealing everything that is on the intake manifold, we, again, were only seeing like 6 or 7 PSI before it was just bleeding off. And we heard it coming from the brake booster area and very quickly realized it was actually all just spilling into the cabin. The diaphragm on the brake booster is blown out or rotted out or whatever, and we were losing every bit of our boost pressure through the brake booster and into the cabin. So if you look at a brake booster, obviously your vacuum and your pressure from your intake is going into this port right here. You've got this boot here with some breather holes on it, and really the only reason it's supposed to breathe is as the pedal goes in, it should be able to let the non-function side of the diaphragm be able to breathe. And it just does that from inside the cabin. And cabin air is supposed to be clean and all that and not really cause an issue there. But if the diaphragm, the vacuum or boost pressure you're seeing on this side is hitting this side of the diaphragm and bleeding off to this side, then you've got a problem. You would think also that from the factory they would have a better setup for not letting boost pressure go to the brake booster. There is not a serviceable one-way valve on the brake booster itself, and the port that comes off of the cylinder head is a screw-in fitting. I've actually got it right here. That is also not a valve. It is just a pass-through port. So there is not a serviceable or one-way valve or anything to put on there. So what I am going to do is put one in line with the idea that you'll have a check ball that will allow vacuum to source to the brake booster, but will not let boost pressure. Make it at least very, very little, if any, make it to the brake booster. And that will help eliminate any issues. Every used brake booster I have on hand has a shaft seal that it leaks. We have pressure tested each and every one, or vacuum tested each and every one, and in one way or the other, I've got a leak. Some worse than others. None of them with diaphragms blown out like his. Excuse me. But even my personal project car, which is a 97 Eclipse that I picked up, recently, has 86 or 88,000 miles on it, but it's still a 27-year-old car. 27-year-old car. So garage kept, low mileage, still has a shaft seal that leaks. So we've got a new brake booster coming. I've got 450cc injectors coming. Those, I believe, are going to be the last two pieces to getting this car up and running. Along with, I do have a check valve coming to go between the brake booster and the intake manifold. So you'll always find stuff that you don't anticipate. We knew of a lot of the things that we could visually see and go, okay, we need a power steering pump, we need a motor mount, we got to fix that bracket, we got to install the harness correctly, we got to install, fix these hoses, we got to fix these leaks, fluid leaks, we got to mount the radiator properly, put it in the fans, and there were some chassis things that we did, like we got the driver's window working. He had some hardware that needed to be installed on it that were guides and mounts and stuff, and then when we opened it up, realized that there was some other pieces that were actually missing or broken that we were able to steal off some of our parts cars. He needed a rear wiper motor for the rear deck. But anyway, there were some other chassis things that we did, body things that we did, but engine related wise, once we started pressure testing or digging into things like the thermostat being gunked up, the coolant system having trash in it, all the boost leaks that we were finding in the intake, manifold area, you're always going to find something else. And then you may struggle to get the parts that you need, especially if it's something that is going on 30 years old, or even more so if you're working on something that's like a real classic, muscle car or something like that. There are parts issues. You either may have to fabricate, design, or engineer something, and to make everything happen. So even something as simple as we're just trying to keep this car relatively stock and get it running before this client dives into more of a build, and getting anything into like a performance build. We just wanted to see the car run and drive properly. It's still been, you find a couple of things and you got to fix a couple of things. So be prepared for that when you get into something. One of the original complaints was the clutch actuator not working. We found at first the line, and I just had that kind of in my hand. So it had this long line going from the master cylinder to the slave cylinder on the clutch system. And right out of this fitting, off of the slave cylinder, it's damaged. It also is kinked and damaged midway right here, where it was completely pinched and preventing flow. And the way it was routed, in fact, there's even more damage. You probably can't see it, but it's got damage right here where it had been hitting or rubbing against something. So we opted to just replace this. I had a good one that came off of a car that we parted out. So we took it and installed that. The client had already put a new master and slave. We tested the slave, didn't really have an issue with it. We still weren't getting good pressure to it, although now we were actually getting some actuation, not full travel. So we tested the master cylinder, which the customer had just replaced, and realized we weren't actually getting full pressure out of it. And what I theorized is that when it was hitting a dead head trying to push against blockage, because we weren't really getting any fluid at all out of that old line. Now we're getting fluid and we're getting some pressure, but not enough. That my theory is that when he was trying to bleed it with the old line, it blew the seal out to where it started bypassing internally in his new setup. So, excuse me. We got a new master cylinder, installed that. Luckily, I actually had one in the box on the shelf. And so we got that installed, bled that, got the line actually properly ran where it is not going to, there's no hazard or concern of it getting damaged, hit, rubbed, kinked, and properly, routed, looks nice and clean. And immediately, once we got that working, we had full travel of the clutch fork, out of the slave cylinder, and that was working just fine. So that was one of the original issues, but we've got that sorted out. The brake system, we have not been able to try. Obviously, we're going to have to pull all this apart to put a new brake booster on it. But we're going to, as we get this thing to where it's actually back on the ground, we'll double check all the drivability. We did find some loose bolts in lower control arms where bolts had been installed but hadn't been tightened up. As soon as I saw that, we immediately had on our to-do list to go over everything and put a wrench and a ratchet on everything on the suspension and make sure it was tight. We found both tie rod ends loose and the threads damaged. They were brand new tie rod ends. So luckily there, we were able to clean the threads up, put new nuts on it, and put those back in without issue. And they tightened the torque spec and everything, got new cotter pins in them. There were cotter pins and stuff missing in some of the ball joints on the castle nuts there. So we made sure those were installed. And so when we do have it back on the ground and running, now we can also test the brakes and everything like that. We did put new hub bearings, hub assemblies, because the wheel bearings on both sides were loose. I mean, very, very loose. So those had to be replaced. And so we did clean up the brakes and lube the slides and everything like that when we put all that together. So everything seems like it's ready to go. That if once we get injectors and once we get a brake booster on here, we should be good to go. The only adjustment being that the car is essentially stock for, all intended purposes. We do have a aftermarket boost controller because I do not have a factory boost solenoid laying around for 2G. I just don't have one. I have looked on every car I've got out in the yard, in every box, looking around for one. It's just something I guess I never thought I'd hang on to. So what we've decided to do is to go with this pretty affordable manual boost controller. We've got kind of just sitting right here since we don't have the intake pipe in. And we've already picked out a place that we're going to mount it. And that way it's nice, clean, accessible, looks good where it's put. And we'll leave the boost gauge that we have set up just sitting on this wiper arm right now. And then once we get the car up and running, we'll set it to relatively stock boost level and leave it at that. So again, the idea is just to kind of get the car up and running properly. At this point, we've boost tested the intake system, and with the brake booster being blocked off at the moment, we took this fitting out and capped it just for testing purposes. And we took it up to 20 PSI with no leaks, other than a little bit at the shaft sills of the throttle body. So, being that at some point in the near future, he's likely to go with a front mount and a turbo and intercooler piping and even possibly a different throttle body. Even if he goes back to a stock throttle body, we'll look at having a reman or reselling this one or something, which isn't really too hard to do. So, but for now, portable, cheap little boost controller, set it at stock level, run it, drive it, test it, and make sure the car runs and drives properly. So that's the story on this one. This is kind of a cool project, something that I'm obviously very familiar with when it comes to the Mitsubishis and the DSMs. And I'm glad to see somebody else who is getting into cars, picking this platform, and having fun with it. I really think he's going to enjoy this car, and we'll probably see it come and go out of the shop, getting modifications and upgrades for some time to come. I'm really kind of excited to see this one going, because this is just, at this point, just a kind of like a mild restoration project to get an old DSM up and going again, and doing it right in the fact that you work through all the bugs and the maintenance issues before you start throwing power adders and modifications to it. It obviously had some pre-existing ones that we're just going to leave in place. No real justified reason to replace them at the moment. Like the exhaust header is a decent piece that he's, I'm sure, going to retain once we put a bigger turbo on it. There's no reason to replace that, so we'll leave it at, leave it be. But this is going to be exciting to see this car develop from where it is now, and I'm excited that we're a part of it. So I'll also, here in a bit, get in the other part of the shop and go over our 97 Subaru rally car project and see, kind of give you an update of where we're at with that. We've had to take a break from a lot of, I guess, shop work to take care of some building development and some building maintenance and stuff like that. Like I said, we're in a lot of transition of moving and some business growth, which has distracted us over the last couple of weeks a little bit. But we're kind of getting back in the swing of things now that those things are happening, and we've got deadlines to get cars ready for races. So we're going to be working on, over the next 6 weeks or so, on getting these race cars finalized and running, and kind of test them out and make sure they're ready to go to racing. So we've got Rallycross Nationals coming up, that we got 2 cars that are going of our own. We've got 2 Subaru rally cars to try to make ready. One for sure going to Show Me Rally. And we've got to have it ready and going. And we'll be going out there as well as support crew to Show Me Rally. So that's some really cool, exciting things that are coming, along with, once we get past probably middle of November, Thanksgiving or so, we will start our move into our new shop. Trying to get through basically till the end of the year, holiday season, to really focus on our shop move, which is some pretty exciting thing. I'm really, really excited about getting into the new building and getting set up over there. So by next year, we're really rocking and rolling over there. I think it's a huge facility, a lot of room to grow. We can actually set up departments in the building, like metal fab and part storage, paint, stuff like that. So we have the room to have a proper large shop. And that's really cool, really exciting. It's most definitely going to be the biggest shop I've ever had of my own, and possibly, I think, the second largest shop I've worked out of. So it's going to be, and I'm really proud of what we're doing and where we're headed. So make sure to follow us and join us as I start putting those videos together and sharing our growth and our development and what direction we're going. So on that note, I'm going to leave this. We'll get back on this on Monday. Well, Tuesday, we're waiting on parts, but we'll get back on this and finish this up next week.